So what I like to start off with is kind of the big picture of how I see the church. I've taught this several times. I've watched it more than I've taught it. I've taught it several times. In case you don't know, there's some families that are here, but I lead all the families in our parish who go through family discipleship or family faith formation. We go through this program a lot differently. We spend like maybe 3 weeks on one episode. I'll watch 5 minutes and we'll talk and ask questions and do it like that. So I'm very, very familiar with it. But there is a big picture that Chris Stefanik has developed here. And perhaps the best way to put it is in my notes. It's like the spiritual life. Because when I was thinking about today and thinking about how to present it, these ideas are not simply just abstract, philosophical, theological ideas. They affect the core of every single one of us. Talking about what does it mean to be happy. And at one point in time when I was much younger, I thought, there'll come a point in my life where I'll just get it. And I'll simply just say, this is what life is about. And now I'm 51 and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life and still trying to figure out ways to be happy. I remember my dad turned 70. I go, Dad, how does it feel to be 70? And he goes, well, it feels like I'm 18 until I have to move. And the older I get, the more I realize how true that is. You know, that there's nothing fundamentally different for me today at 51 than there was when I was 18 or 19. I'm sure that's true of everyone in this room. So we still have these same longings and desires. We're still seeking the same things in some way, shape, or form. Regardless of how many miles we have in us or on us, we still have these fundamental desires. And so what I like to do is kind of present the next 7 weeks as not simply just ideas, but to talk about it in terms of meditation, prayer, reflection, make it more of a spiritual experience as opposed to or alongside with an intellectual experience. And so in Catholic spirituality, we often talk about the 3 ways of the spiritual life. The first way is called the purgative way. And the second way is called the illuminative way. And the third way is called the unitive way. Now, what do these big words actually mean? Well, basically it means this, that when a person begins a spiritual journey, the first thing they encounter is the mess they are, our sinfulness. We realize that God is God and I am not. And there's a big gap between where I am and what the Lord is asking of me. And I'm struggling with my own self-centeredness, my own sinfulness, my own striving after this and that, and trying to figure out what is God actually asking of me. And so it's a purgation because there comes a point in time where we realize if we're going to seek God, we have to do X and stop doing Y. And that means giving the simple act of the Lord saying, I want you to pray more means we have to find time in our day to pray, which probably means we have to deny ourselves of something. Unless we can sleep or a TV show or something. Something has to be taken away so we can put prayer into our days. The same thing's true with exercise, anything that we do, we have to make a decision. I'm going to have a value of these things are valuable to me, and therefore I'm going to do things that are less valuable to me. So there's this interior reality that we all go through of reevaluating our lives when the Lord says, I want you to pray more, I want you to go to Mass more, I want you to serve those around you more. That means I can't do this, that, or the other. There's a self-denial involved. This is why we call it the purgative way. And the purgative way is all about self-knowledge, which is this episode and the next episode. Understanding what it means to be a human being. Not just in some idea, because we all have an experience of being a human being, but what does the church say about what it means to be a human? What does the Lord say in the Gospels about what it means to be a human being? These are the questions that are going to be asked. And then we have the illuminative way. What that simply means is that as you progress in the spiritual life, as you begin to pray more, read more, engage in more acts of self-denial so you have more freedom to give to God, a deeper understanding of what it means to be a Christian, a disciple of Christ, a deeper understanding of who God is becomes more clear in our mind. Our minds become illuminated. That's what that word means, is as a clarity of understanding, a clarity of knowledge. If we take this and compare it to a relationship with another human being, I think about my relationship with my wife. It started off, I want to say it's a purgative element, but there's a point in time where I had to sit there and say, do I want to go out with my friends or do I want to go out with Monica? I can't do both. So there's a point of self-denial in order to pursue the relationship. And as the relationship is being pursued, I got to know her better, just by the simple fact I was being with her. What's true in our relationship with other human beings is true with our relationship with God. And then finally, as we come to know God more, not just in our head, but also in our heart, as we pray more, we enter into a deeper union with him. He becomes more alive to us, or more, the experience of God. The experience of God becomes more real. And we enter into this element of where we feel and aware, or we are aware of God's presence. In a similar way of where, so my wife went to Wyoming the last 4 or 5 days. She took her father, who's from Wyoming, took her father up there to visit his old stomping grounds and see his younger brother and sister. And I was keenly aware of her absence. And even though we talked on the phone and we texted, she was just not there. And I just felt it, the absence. And so the union, and when she's in the house, we don't even have to talk, but I just know she's there, and vice versa. There's this element of just the awareness of another person, especially my wife or your spouse, being with you. This is what God wants, that through this process of self-denial, of drawing close to him, more prayer, we just have this awareness that he's with us. And this is the unitive way. So so the unitive way is the last 2 episodes. So the first 2 episodes are about who we are. Episodes 3, 4, and 5 really about who God is. And the last 2 episodes are about what does it mean to be united with him. And so that's how I'm going to approach it. So you have the book. The book does not go into this route. It goes a completely different way. But I think this was the framework, this is the framework I've seen in this, and I've read some of the material that Chris Stefanik has used to write this, and it's much broader and bigger than what he's presenting, which is obvious it should be, because we can't teach what we don't know, and then when we teach, we only give a fragment of what we know. So that's how we're going to see it. So I want you to kind of think about this over the week, to take what we're going to talk about, what you read in the book, what he talked about, and what we're about to talk about, and really kind of enter into a period of prayer. But what does it mean for me? What do these ideas mean for me, and how do they resonate with me? So the very first idea he presents, in a very humorous yet startling way, is the fundamental reality that we are all going to die. It's a simple, as Jim Morrison of the Doors once said, no one gets out of here alive, right? It's just the way it is. Now, this sentiment is not unique to modern day philosophical nihilism, which was Jim Morrison was totally immersed in. It's not unique, a clever way to get people's attention. This idea that we are going to die, and it becomes the foundation stone of our spiritual life, is like some bedrock Catholic spirituality. It's the term memento mori, remember death. He's not a saint, but it's Thomas the Kempis, who wrote the book, The Imitation of Christ. The book that there's only one book that has sold more than The Imitation of Christ in the last 500 years. And that book is what? The Bible. This is one of the most read books by Christians across communities, across denominations. And in this book, he says, begin each day with the thought that, how would I live if I were to die today? If I weren't going to make it to the evening. And when you go to sleep, pray and go to sleep as if you might not even wake up. This is the prayer we learned, at least I learned when I was a little boy. Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. And if I die before I wake, I pray to the Lord my soul to keep. This is the foundation of the awareness that we don't know how long we have. We simply don't know. Which means a couple things. So I guess Stephen Covey, I read the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People many, many years ago. And it's a book that has influenced me. And he has an idea. He talks about begin with the end in mind. And if we're all going to die, isn't that how we ought to organize our life? If death awaits us, how would we live if we knew when we were going to die? If I said, if the Lord appeared to you and said, it's going to be on this date and this year, how would you spend the rest of your life? And that's a question that we all have to ask. There's another self-help guy. His name's Anthony Robbins. Have you heard of Tony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within? He has something called the rocking chair test. So basically what he says is this, that if you want to do something with your life, and may say you pursue a degree or go on a journey or a vacation or whatever, he has like swim with dolphins, learn the violin. He has all these crazy things in one of his books. Imagine that you are, at the end of your days on the rocking chair on your front porch, and what would you feel if you had never done that? It's an interesting thought experiment. But it doesn't go far enough. And that's the problem with it. And that's the problem with a lot of self-help. It doesn't go far enough. It doesn't keep the transcendent in mind. That when we die, it's not simply the end. What happens when we die? Who do we meet? Who do we say face to face? The Lord. It's the Lord. And so the better reality is what St. Ignatius of Loyola said, and that's not the rocking chair, but the judgment seat. That when we die, we are all going to stand face to God, face to face with the Lord. And so we have to ask ourselves, if we're going to stand and see him face to face, how do we want that meeting to go? How do we want this conversation to go with the Lord? What do we want him to say? Because I don't think we're going to be doing a lot of talking. I don't know. Who knows? He might not do a lot of talking either. It might just be a very quick. So there's there's a novel. You guys have heard of C.S. Lewis, right? And he wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia. And there's a scene, in, I think it's called The Last Battle, in which all the creatures of Narnia line up before the lion Aslan. No, Aslan is the symbol of Christ throughout all of the Chronicles of Narnia. And when they line up before him, all the creatures, they just stare, they look at him and he looks at them, and then they go, either to the place of light or to the forest of darkness is what it is. There's no words being exchanged. In other words, it's just kind of an illumination of who they are in relationship to him. I kind of think that's what it means, that's what judgment is going to be like, but I don't know. What I do know, and what the church teaches, that we're going to meet him face to face. How do we want that meeting to go? That's a question to ask. And then we think about it, well, if I want to do X, is that the rocking chair? If I do X, what does that mean when I meet the Lord? If I do Y, what does that mean when I meet the Lord? Would he want me to do that? Would he not want me to do that? These are just questions of prayer and discernment that we enter into, because whether we like it or not, we're going to meet the Lord. And so to have this remembrance of death, and it might be tonight, it might be next week, it might be in 10 years, who knows? No one knows. And so to have this awareness that we're constantly, standing on the threshold of eternity, and might enter into this reality of seeing the Lord face to face, and then allowing our actions to be determined by those choices, or reflectively looking back on our day and say, ooh, if I were to meet the Lord tonight, I would not want to have to talk to him about what I did this afternoon, right? And to make it an examination of conscience, and to sit there and say, I really gave in to the worst part of myself today, and I'm sorry for that. And allow that to be a point of reflection. And then finally, just this idea of death and eternity, as I was pondering about it, it reminded me of something I heard many, many, many years ago. And it was this. Because I think it's hard for us to wrap our brain around the concept that we live 100 years, 80 years, 75 years, whatever it is, and then we have all eternity. And what does eternity actually mean? I mean, it's a mind-blowing concept. And so the metaphor that was used that really kind of got me thinking along these lines was this. If you only had to live, if January 1st was the only day on which you would be judged, and the other 364 days would be lived out based upon your decisions of what you did on January 1st. How would you live January 1st? In other words, think about this. See our life as one day and see eternity as the next 364 days. Just a visual I have that's helped me. So would you make the choices if you knew that there was, if you had to suffer, you had to go into self-denial, you had to spend time not sleeping, you think of all the worst day you can possibly imagine. And you had to live that with grace and self-denial and let other people just kind of have their way with you. Would you do it if you knew the next 364 days you were going to be happy and in peace and contentment? Or would you rather be selfish? Would you give in to your own base inclinations? Would you be greedy? Would you give all that stuff if you knew the next 364 days were going to be filled with pain? It's just a way, a mental exercise to think about the relationship between what we do in this life and the ramifications it has in the next life. This all goes back to the idea of memento mori. Memento mori. And finally, I just glanced out at my notes. I have it in my notes. His name's Francis de Sales. He wrote a foundational book. It's called Introduction to the Devout Life. And in this book, he takes the reader through 14 days, I think it's 14 days of meditations. And do you know where he starts? You're going to die. That's meditation number 1. Meditation number 2, there's a hell. That's meditation number 2. Chris started it off pretty simple. You're just going to die. Now we're talking about being happy. You're going to die, and there's a hell. It's just the reality. This is bedrock Catholic spirituality. So he starts there to kind of put everything in mind, that we don't simply just live a life that we're going from day to day to day, one point of enjoyment to the next point of enjoyment, but rather that we're moving toward an end, and that end is not simply when this life comes to an end. It's when this life comes to the end and the next life begins. Because death is not the end of anything. Everyone in this room is immortal. Think about that. Everyone in this room is immortal. There was a time where none of us existed. Then we came into existence. And once we come into existence, God will not take us out of existence. We will all live forever. And death is simply the end of this existence and the beginning of the next one. That is the Christian way, the Catholic way of understanding death. It is contrary to everything that we hear. I was in the supermarket once, actually just a couple weeks ago, and I heard these two old guys, and they were talking about aches and pains or whatever. And I'm at the point now where I can kind of sympathize. Like, oh, it's kind of hard to get out of bed nowadays. And one guy said, well, it beats the alternative. And I get it. But I was really close to saying, well, if the alternative is going to be with the Lord for all eternity, then does it really beat the alternative? You know, it's just something to think about, a challenge, a mental exercise to go through is how do we understand this? And then Chris talks about happiness. And this is something, we need to discuss in detail. The idea is, the first idea, this is a startling idea, just think about this. Every decision you make because you think it will make you happy. Every choice you make, every sin you commit, every sin I commit, we commit because we think it's going to make us happy. I get so angry. I gotta let it go. And I'm one of the guys. My mom. My dad was as patient as Job, and I did not get that. I got my mom's temper. It was like, it just kind of sets you off. And there were points in time I thought, you know what? If I could just give into it, I'm going to be happy. And I would give into it. And I was happy until I wasn't. And it was pretty quickly after I calmed down and see the wreckage of my kids' emotional state and say, oh, maybe I screwed up. But we all battle these things. But every decision we make, for good or for ill, at the moment we make it, it's because we think at that moment in time it's going to make us happy. And so the challenge we all have is that, do we understand happiness correctly? And so one thing Chris did not talk about is the difference between what we call false goods and true goods. He kind of gets into it, the idea of, I think wealth isn't a false good, but, we think about, like, I need, for example, to keep it very simple, I'm not feeling very good. There's a good way to relieve not feeling very good, and that is a diet and exercise. And that's a true good we can pursue. And there's a false way of not pursuing, of trying to overcome bad feelings, and that is drugs and alcohol. What the goal is what? We want to be happy. And both of them will lead us to a kind of happiness. One happiness is very quick and yet fleeting. The other happiness is something we have to struggle and perhaps struggle the rest of our lives for, even to the point that I'm just going to give up. I'm never going to be skinny. I'm never going to feel healthy, because it's a challenge. It's a challenge in this day and age. But to keep that in mind, that when we think about what we're desiring and what we're pursuing, have we thought about, is the goal that we have in front of us a good goal or a false goal? A true good or a false good? And take a step back and kind of really analyze that and think about that. It's this immediate concern I have, that which I'm going to pursue, invest my time and my energy, perhaps my money in. Is this really going to be a good that's going to benefit me and benefit those around me, or is it just simply fleeting? These are challenges we all face at all times. How we spend our time. Is it, because I see a lot of people, I'm assuming a lot of people here are retired, right? Which means you have a lot more freedom than you did when you weren't retired and you didn't have kids. And so Father David, I was talking to him a couple of days ago, and he said, so you and Monica are going to be empty nesters soon. How does that make you feel? And I couldn't hide the grin. I was just like, yeah, I can't wait. Of course, I've been the stay-at-home dad for 20 some odd years, so I'm just like, beaming with the thought, giddy. But he said, now what are you going to do with your time then? It's a really interesting. I still have a year. I don't want to think about it too deeply, but my wife and I started kind of talking about it. Like, what would we do? It's a different reality. Suddenly, we don't have that. We only have one kid left at home, so it's not like we have four and we're just running, rampant. But there's a point in time of how do we spend that time? What do we pursue? And we live in a culture of where retirement is the time to kind of just kick back and just have a good time and relax. That's how it's at least presented. Now, whether the reality is, I'm not really, of course, that's the reality, but it's presented as, you work hard, then you have this time to kind of do whatever you want. But is that what the Lord's asking of us? And that's the real challenge in the question. Now, there are two ways we can be happy. The first way is by pursuing a good, and the second way is by obtaining the good. So think about it this way. If I want to be a professional musician, I can be happy if I go, I just want to be a professional musician and I don't do anything about it. What does that mean? I have this desire I'm not acting upon. Is being a professional musician a good? It is a good, right? It might not be, we have to, in general, it's a good, right? It might not be a good for this particular person, but in general, no one can sit there and say, no, it's an evil thing to be a professional musician. That's false. So a young person goes, I want to be a professional musician, or we're older, I want to take up the violin or the piano. I've never had to do this before. Are these goods? Yes, they're good. Now, if we don't act on it, what's going to happen? If this desire is just going to linger, and we're going to become more and more discontent, right? We're not acting on it. So happiness comes when we start pursuing something. So if we want to be a professional musician, that means I'm going to start taking lessons. Or if I want to learn how to play the piano, I'm going to start taking lessons. I'm going to start actively pursuing it. There's a goal. And when I pursue this goal, I'm happy in the sense that I'm pursuing the goal. And then there's actually the attainment of that which we desire. I can now, let's say, so I used to play the guitar. I think everyone kind of seems to know that. I used to want to be a rock star. Everyone kind of knows that. Then I wanted to take up the piano. Pick up the piano, and I say, okay, my goal is to be able to play for at least from beginning to end perfectly. That's my goal, so I work, and I do that. And so now I have the joy of pursuit and the joy of attainment. Does that make sense? Uh-huh. What's true with that is true with our spiritual lives. That's what we have to understand. That when we look at the fact that we are one day going to die and meet the Lord, then our journey to the Lord in this life brings us happiness. And when we're not on this journey and we're denying this reality, we are not happy. We feel discontent. We feel there's something missing. And the reason why is because we're not acting according to the truth of who we are. And this is why so many people are unhappy, because they're trying to fill this gap within them with something other than God. They're pursuing all these goods, and it might be good, a good job, a good family, a good reputation, different hobbies. These are all goods. But if these are the be-all and end-all of what we want, then they can never, what happens? I finally get to play Fur Elise, and then I get arthritis, and I can't. Where's my happiness now? And we all know this happens. We all know that we can hit a certain good, this is great, and then we get to the certain point that I can't do what I used to be able to do for whatever reason. Either a lack of time, a lack of energy, an illness, old age. Suddenly we can't do what we were able to do. And if we set all of our hopes on these other exterior, these worldly goods, as they begin being taken from us just through the natural course of living, we're going to hit a point of where I'm not happy. And so what are we pursuing? It goes back to the idea of death. What are we pursuing? What are we seeking? And then how are we moving toward it? So I would suspect that if I ask all of you here, because this is a church group, and say, what are you seeking? You all know the answer, because Chris gave it to you. It's in the book. I've hinted at it. We're seeking God. That's what we want. How are we pursuing God? How are we moving on this journey? And so we have to start asking ourselves these questions. And what's true, I just had a doctor's appointment this morning. And he said, well, you got to start losing weight. And I was like, yes. Thank you. I know that. So he said, well, how are we going to do this? I said, well, your guess is as good as mine. And so we started talking about strategies. Well, what's true for me in this situation is true for all of us in the spiritual life. What is the strategy for drawing closer to God? Now, in general, the prescription is pretty simple. You have to pray more, and that's the foundation of it. You have to pray more. If you're not praying every day, then start praying every day. And when I say praying every day, I don't mean you need to start praying for 4 hours a day. I mean, take a moment in time to do exactly what St. Francis de Sales recommends. Take a moment, quiet yourself, and say 4 prayers. The Apostles' Creed, the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Glory Be. But don't just race through them. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Done. No, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a meditation. I know. I'm glad someone thought that was funnier than I. What we're looking for is a meditation on these prayers. We say, I believe in God. What does that really mean to you? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for me? I believe, Our Father who art in heaven. What do these words mean? How do they resonate? And just that's it. It might take 2 or 3 minutes. But we're not talking about 2 or 3 hours. We're talking about 2 or 3 minutes. And just start with that. This is St. Francis de Sales. He's a doctor of the church. Recommends this is how one starts the activity of every daily prayer consistently. And if we do that, what happens is the Lord goes, He gives us, we begin to delight in it. And if we delight in something, what do we want to do? More. We want to do it more. And so it's the amazing thing of the spiritual life. It's not simply, when it comes to dieting, when we do it, there's a good chance we're not going to like it, and therefore there's a good chance we're not going to do it. And there's no one on the other side of it who's going to help us, give us the enjoyment. But when it comes to prayer, it's the opposite. When we start, it's very simple. We don't have to rearrange our lives. We don't have to change any type of habits, except maybe to find 2 or 3 minutes somewhere. And we have someone on the other side who, when he sees our devotion gives us the joy of the act. And when we begin to enjoy it, then we do it more because it makes us happy. But not simply the fleeting happiness of the things of this life, it brings us true happiness because we know this daily prayer, this simple act of 2 or 3 minutes for God takes us to the next day, and it ultimately has us arrive in heaven with the Lord. So if you're not praying every day, just start doing that. If you are praying every day, the next question is, well, what else can you do? And when I say don't ask, it's not like, oh, I'm already praying 5 minutes a day, now I'm going to go to 2 hours. No. I'm already praying 5 minutes in the morning. Maybe in the evening, I'll read half a chapter of the Gospels. Small things. Daily, though. Every single day. The most important advice I ever got from a spiritual director was this. Success in prayer is fidelity to prayer. Just show up and do it. And if we're there doing it, the Lord will provide the rest. All we have to bring him, and all we can bring him, are 5 loaves and 2 fish. And that's it. But the last time the Lord was given 5 loaves and 2 fish, what happened? He fed 5,000 people, and there were 12 full baskets left over. We bring him the meagerness that we have and say, this is all we have. What else can we do? The answer is nothing. I will do the rest. But we have to have that trust. And so as we begin that routine of prayer, what happens? We're moving toward God. We begin to have that joy that we're moving toward God, that happiness within, and knowing that one day we will attain God. We will reach him. And so these are the keys of this reality. Moving toward God and attaining God. The other thing about happiness we have to realize, and I have it in my notes, is there's different ways of looking at it. There's external happiness. We all know external happiness won't fulfill us whatsoever. I still remember, I tell the story a lot, so if you've heard the story, sorry, but it is what it is. But I still remember when flat screen TVs came out. And boy, I wanted one. So I said, Monica, I really want a flat screen TV. And she said, but we don't need one. I said, I understand that, but I want it. And she goes, well, it costs a lot of money. She is the financial, she has a degree in finance. So she's like the financial brains of the house, and she was talking about it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to give up this ghost. It's not going to go anywhere. And a few weeks later, or months later, she goes, hey, Target has a Super Bowl sale for flat screen TVs. I was there. And so I bought the TV, I got home, and I put it in the entertainment center, and I took 4 steps back, and the first words out of my mouth were, I could have gotten the bigger one. And it tainted me with that TV until a lightning strike blew it out. And that's really what happened. A lightning strike did blow out that TV. And then I got one the correct size. But this is what it is. We all know this. We all know it. We get a car, we get the house, we get the clothes, we get whatever, and shortly thereafter there's something else we want. So there's no material good that's going to make us happy. And that's really hard to impress upon young people. They have to learn it over time. Physical goods. Well, in this room, we all know physical goods are fleeting. I mean, growing up in the 80s, you have Arnold Schwarzenegger, you have Sylvester Stallone, and it's like, oh my God, and you have Christy Brinkley and all the supermodels. It was like, that was all it was about in the 80s. And now you look at them and it's like, oh, they look like old people, right? They're not this beautiful, they're people. Age hit them all. And we all know that. I think it takes time to catch up with that. But if we can't be happy in the physical life, if we can't be happy in the material life, where can we be happy? Spiritual life, the spiritual life. And that's where the true happiness lies in, because that's what we have. And that's what we take with us. That's all we can take with us. I don't think I own anything. No, that's not true. When you go to my house and you walk around my house, you'll see one thing I brought into the marriage. It was an old desk. And I won't part with that desk for the life of me for some reason. But it's my desk. Anyway, but these are the things. These fall away. They all fall away. And we're left with that which is inside of us. This interior life, an intellectual life. But even that can be fleeting. As we know, with certain diseases, we lose even that. And so, as Chris Stefanik brings up, there's nothing in this life that's going to make us ultimately completely and totally happy. It can all be taken from us, either by, in any way, shape, or form. Which means that the real happiness does not lie in this life. Where does it lie? In the next life. And that's the truth of who we are. That the good of who we are is found in the next life. Therefore, memento mori. Remember death. Because as a spiritual writer named Frank Sheed once said, if we die and have all the success in this life, but we end up in hell, we have lived an unsuccessful life. And if we have nothing in this life, and the world looks at us and say, this is the most unsuccessful person who's ever lived, and we die and go to heaven, we have lived a successful life. That's a profound thought. And that should be holding with us. It should govern every part of our mind, every second of our day as we make decisions. Where are we going? And then finally, I want to talk one last thing about this, because Bill Hanslick is a very interesting story. I often wondered why on earth would this great, because the first time I watched, I go, oh, it really tanked, the video, when it got to the Bill Hanslick story, trying to figure out how all this fits together. But then I was reading a book, one of the books that he used, and it's by a guy named Father Robert Spitzer. It's called The 4 Levels of Happiness. And I began to see, oh, here's how it all connects. Because the first level of happiness is simply our physical needs. We all need to have clothes, we all need to have food, we all need to have shelter. The basic needs need to be met. We don't need to have a 20,000 square foot mansion, but we need to have a place to go home, and that we're not out on the streets. These are simple needs. So when those things are met, we go to the next level of happiness. And that level of happiness is self versus others. This is the happiness that every adolescent struggles with. And sometimes, even people who don't look like they're adolescents are still struggling with this reality of us versus other people. Keeping up with the Joneses, as my mom would say. How come she has that? How come he has that? How come I don't? This comparison game. And so what he talks about, Father Robert Spitzer, is to get out of the comparison game, we have to learn how to be content with who we are. We have to see ourselves as a gift from God. No one in this room asked to be created. No one in this room asked to come into existence. We are a gift God gave to us. At night, when we thank God for all the good things he's given us, do we start off with, thank you for creating me. Thank you for making me me. There's a parable of Jesus. He goes into the temple. 2 men go into the temple. One's a Pharisee, one's a tax collector. The Pharisee goes up front and goes, thank you that I'm not like him. I fast, and I don't do this, and I don't do this. It's a comparison game. But there's another way to look at that. 2 men go into the temple, and one man looks at it and goes, thank you that I'm not like him. For me, I like the fact that I love literature. I like the fact that I don't like sports. I like the fact that I like art, and I'm an artist. I like the fact that I'm a musician, or at least was. I like who I am. And I'm glad I'm not an engineer. And I'm glad I don't have a mathematical mind. And I'm glad I don't have all these other things. Because if I had those other things, I wouldn't be me. We have to get to that level of where we're just, this is who I am, and I'm happy with who I am. This is myself versus others. It's like, I know you are beautiful because God created you exactly the way he wanted you to be. And I don't need to compare myself to you because he created me the way he wanted me to be. The way he wanted me to be. And therefore, the gifts I bring are different from the gifts you bring, and that's good. Because if we all brought the same gifts, that's like, we're all going to bring food next week, and guess what? Everyone's going to bring brownies for dessert. There's a point like, one too many servings of brownies, right? We need to have variety is the spice of life, as the old saying goes. So once we become content with ourselves, we go to the third level of happiness. And that's being inward, focused on making me happy versus making other people happy. And this is where Bill Hanslick is. he illustrates this story that he was focused on, I got to win the championship. I got to lead this team. But then when the rug was pulled out from underneath him, what did he have left? He had nothing. And then what did he do? He began to think, well, how can I give, not to myself, but how can I give to others? And he started this program, which now serves like 20,000 kids a year. It's pretty amazing. And so this outward movement. So if we're struggling with happiness, well, I would assume that among this group, the first level is not much of a problem. We all have a place to go. We all have basic food and clothing. We might not have the jeans we want, right? My wife and I was just talking. She goes, I remember when I went to Wyoming, Guess jeans were big. This is back in the 80s. And her cousin made fun of her because she didn't have a pair of Guess jeans. But that's stuff that happens when you're in high school. It doesn't stop when you're in your 50s or 60s or 70s or whatever. We still are doing that. We're still doing that. And so we have that material. We need to have that in place. We need to accept who we are vis-a-vis other people. I'm a gift that God gave me, and I accept who I am. Then we have to look at how do I take this gift and make it a gift to other people, realizing that we can't be all things to all people. We can simply be ourselves, and whoever embraces that, that's who we're called to serve, and whoever doesn't embrace that, that's who we're not called to serve. And that's just the way it's going to be. And then finally, the last level of happiness is realizing, back to memento mori, that no matter what we do in this life, it's always going to leave us empty in a certain way, short in a certain way, because we're made for something more. As St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, O Lord. And a way to think about it is this: God made us with a God-shaped box in our soul, or a cross-shaped box in our soul. And there's only one object, one person that can fill that, and it's God. And nothing else can fill it. And we can just keep on shoving stuff, trying to get it in there, and what's going to happen? It's never going to get in there. And that emptiness is going to remain until we fill it with the one person who can fill that shape, that God-shaped box. It leads us back to prayer, which leads us back to thinking about death and how do we order our lives. Because, as Frank Sheed said, the unsuccessful life is living a great life here and then dying and not being with the Lord. And we only have this time to do it. So the whole first episode is about understanding the fundamental drive. Everything that we do to make us happy, period. The problem we all face, everyone in this room, is that we are conflicted within ourselves. We have sin within us. And so we go, oh, that looks great. Oh, that looks great. Oh, that looks great. And we lose track of the good, the one, the beautiful, who's right in front of us. We're like the squirrels, the dogs on Up. What? Is it Up? She's getting, I know that movie. The dog, the squirrel, Have you guys seen Up? I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's a movie where these dogs, they have the cones, right? Never mind. Anyway, there's a movie, it's a Pixar movie, and these dogs show up somewhere, and they can't get to where they need to go because they're always getting distracted by squirrels. That's what we do. We need to go to God, and we're getting distracted by everything else, these shiny objects. And so that's what it is about. So my hope is that over the next week, you take some of these ideas into prayer, consideration, reflection. Ask yourself, how do I seek happiness? How have I ordered my life? If I were to die on July 1st, would I be ready to meet the Lord? Do I have the judgment seat mentality, or I just simply have the rocking chair mentality? This is how lives begin to get transformed. So that's all I have tonight. I do have a couple announcements. I went in with a prayer. Then we'll do announcements. And then if you need to talk to me or like to talk to me, I can stay here as long as anyone wants me to talk. So let's end with the prayer, and then we'll go to some of the announcements. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.